Hey guys, on this week's Movement Debrief video, I want to talk a little bit about pelvic and rib position. So first we're going to start with the pelvis. Now what we're usually looking for is a neutral pelvis. So the way that I try and describe this to my clients or my athletes is think of your pelvis as a bucket of water. And you want to keep your pelvis flat so you're not spilling out the front of the back. So let's see what that looks like. If I were to go into an anterior tilt, you can see right there as I start to move, the front of the pelvis is dropping down and the back is tilting up. So basically I'm spilling water out the front of my bucket. So when I finish that position, I've lost that neutral position. You can also see that we start to get compressive loads in the posterior part of the lumbar disc. Now a posterior tilt is going to be exactly the opposite. So I'm back to neutral and now I'm going to dump water out the back of my bucket. So the front's coming up, the back is dropping down, and what we're left with is positioned down through this way. So I'm always trying to keep, for the most part, the pelvis neutral, and that's going to show good stability through the middle. But there's another part to that equation. So right now the pelvis is neutral, but we're also looking at the ribs in relationship to the pelvis. So right here, if I'm looking at my ribs on top of the pelvis, the ribs are also neutral. So think of two bowls kind of sitting on top of each other. But through this movement here, I'm going to keep the pelvis neutral, but we're going to see the ribs start to move. So here, you can see that tilting. So the ribs are opening in the front, tilting down the back, which again is going to put a lot of compressive loads on that lumbar spine. And it's also going to get it where I cannot brace and activate through the anterior muscles of the trunk. We can also do the opposite of that, where I can start to crunch down. Now here, it kind of looks like that bad posture that we get into, but you'll notice the pelvis is still neutral, even though the ribs are starting to close down, over close in the front, and we're starting to kind of overstretch in the back. And then you can see what really does to my head is we start to get that forward carry, which we really want to be careful of. So once I get those two things, but now it's not always one or the other. Sometimes they can work together in order to really cause havoc. So in this position, I'm fairly neutral across the two. But then when I start to get in this really bad position, you can see right there, I'm dumping water out the front of my bucket, but I'm also opening and compressing down through the ribs. So I'm dumping water out the front of my bucket, but then I've also lost that rib position, and you can see right on this tail end, guess where all that compressive force is? So now we have very little activity down the entire anterior chain. So the whole front side, I don't know why I drew a circle there. The whole front side is really not working very much, and then we're getting a whole lot of inactivity. And then we can oppose that as well by going the opposite way. Now you see this one looks similar to that slouch posture we did before, but you'll also notice this time my legs aren't straight anymore. Okay, they're bent because I've gone into that posterior shift, and then the ribs are splitting and opening out that way. So now we have too much compressive force coming down in the anterior, and then we're opening up too much in the posterior, so we're losing all that ability to be strong through there. So what I'm looking for is the strong relationship between those two areas. So can I keep pelvis neutral and ribs neutral as I go through movement? So I'm looking for both of them simultaneously. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Be sure to head over to kcstutzman.com to check out more Movement Debriefed videos.